Hallo allemaal. Ja. Welkom, mijn naam is Jeroen Janssens en ik ga het vandaag hebben over hoe dat je R en Python met elkaar kunt...
Speak English.
Oh my god, my apologies. Oh my god. Hey. All right, I got this. Wouldn't it be great if I could just use the same language for everything? But no, sometimes in order to get the job done, you need to, resort to other languages, however strange they may be. And the same is for data science, right? There might be situations where you need to make combinations of tools or languages out there. So, for example, you may have written a Python application that needs to use an algorithm that's only available inside an R package. Or maybe you've done your analysis in R, which needs to be part of a larger ETL pipeline written in Python. Right? So what do you do in those situations? Well, you take a polyglot approach. So I've had a few of those situations over the past few years, and I want to share some stories with you today. Now, this won't be a very technical talk, because I think the main challenge is not going to be the code that you need to write, but your mindset, the way you're going to handle this, your way of thinking. Right? I really believe that if you want to be effective as a data scientist, you need to be able to recognize when it's okay to use the same language for the entire project, or when it's better to get in the help of some other tool or language. Yeah? So who here uses R or Python? Show of hands. R or Python? Right, not that many. R or Python. It's not. All right, that's okay. If you're watching this on YouTube, almost everybody raised their hands. So, and keep your hands raised. Who here is using SQL? Congratulations, you are already a polyglot data scientist, perhaps without even being aware of this. So there are, of course, many other languages and tools available, but in this talk, I'm going to focus on just R and Python. And rest assured, I'm not suggesting that you should transition from R to Python. Although I realize, I've heard that there are plenty of people in a situation at the place that they work that they do need to transition. But I really see this as a spectrum, right? It's not R or Python. You can combine these two beautiful languages in multiple ways. And which one is best depends entirely on your situation. Okay, story time. About 13 years ago, I started working as a data scientist at a startup in New York City. I was the first data scientist, and all the engineers there were using Python. So I'm like, all right, I got this. We've got pandas, we've got notebooks, but oh my, I don't want to visualize my data using matplotlib. I had seen what ggplot2 could do. So what did I do? I took a polyglot approach. So the solution, conceptually it looks like this, right? And try to think if you have had a similar situation in the past where this might have been appropriate, or maybe there is something currently going on. I don't know, but in my specific situation, there was some IPython magic that I could use that uses the package rpy2 under the hood. Right? So if you're in a similar situation, then I could recommend rpy2. Now, in this particular case, it was fine because I was the only data scientist doing this. Yeah? And for data visualization specifically, as we have seen in the previous presentation as well, there is now the wonderful Plot9 package, a Python port of ggplot2. And speaking of which, Posit is currently organizing a contest for Plot9, as well as a table contest. So if you're into visualizing data or creating tables, I recommend that you participate. So it could be a nice excuse to try out that other language. So the deadline is October 3rd for these two contests. And if you search for 2025 Plot9 contest, then you'll get to see the announcement and you can see more details. All right, story time. I was working at a Dutch telecommunications company in the Netherlands at a team that only used R. All right, fantastic. I used the tidyverse and ggplot2 still, and I did some fancy dimensionality reduction, and I created a machine learning model. I was asked to create a machine learning model that would then be used on their website. Yeah, so I had this nicely wrapped up and was all good to go. So when I then spoke to the team responsible for serving these models, right, would be an API kind of situation, they were like, yeah, we don't do that here. We only use Python. So luckily, I used Annoy, which is a C++ library for doing approximate nearest neighbor search. So I realized that's really specific. But this particular package had both language bindings in R and Python available. So what I could do is what I like to call the save and load approach. Right? It doesn't have to be that complicated. You can save intermediate results, right, say to disk or to a database, and let some other process read this. Right? It doesn't have to be fancy. This might work, and it also doesn't have to be, in our situation, we had multiple processes reading from this database, but, it could be a single one, those languages could be flipped. So this approach is very flexible, but keep in mind that you may need additional coordination, right? So that you ensure that both sides of the database or disk are being run at the correct times. So the polyglot approach is nothing new, yeah? So the ability to easily combine multiple tools and languages has been around for over 50 years. 50 years, when the Unix command line got its pipe operator. So this is not so much a single story, but over the past 15 years, this has become more a way of working for me. And the idea here is that the pipe operator connects the standard output stream of the first tool to the standard input stream of the second tool, right? There's no saving to disk. Now, keep in mind that according to the Unix philosophy, text is the universal interface. So if you have to write and read, a data frame, that will most likely be CSV, and so that's something to keep in mind. Now, you can send binary data over the pipe, but then you wouldn't be playing nice with the gazillion other tools out there. And again, this approach works for any language. Yeah? And you can make that chain as long as you want. But hey, it's not for everybody, I realize that. But if you do want to give this a go, you might enjoy this book I wrote a couple of years ago. It's available for free online. Now, the last story that I want to share with you is more a cautionary tale. So, I was once again working at a Dutch company, this time a utilities company. And they had a huge ETL pipeline, so to speak, set up. It started off as some R code, and then later on they added some Python, and there was some copying, and RPy2, right? But eventually it became a process that took over 700 gigabytes of RAM on a single machine to run. I believe it took over 2 days to finish. And that was okay, because these calculations only needed to be done twice a year. Right? They were needed to make predictions about the utility grid and how much power was going over them, so that they could make choices on where to reinforce the network, add additional transformers. So pretty important stuff. But then management came down to us and they said, all right, so instead of doing this for 10% of our network, why don't you do this for everything that we have? And instead of doing this twice a year, why don't you do this every week? Oh yeah, your budget is 5,000 euros a month. So we had a real problem here. We had the reverse problem, because using both Python and R was really hurting our performance, right? It also made our virtual machines, our Docker images way too large, and it was very difficult to maintain. So we needed to convince the rest of the team that we actually needed a monoglot approach, yeah? So we were successful in the end. We suggested, okay, let's use polars. Mind you, this is almost 3 years ago, before polars was cool. But we were really excited. I mean, in the end, it was a big success. Everything was rewritten to Python and polars, and it all worked out. But it was a big investment. So my colleague and I, we learned so much about polars. We were so excited about it that we decided to write a book about this at the same time. Now, on this website, you can find more information and get the first chapter for free. Right, and for $5, I can send you the PDF. All right, so now, so just to keep in mind that everything that you add, every dependency, and yeah, also holds for packages, it holds for tools, for entire languages, everything that you add, of course, adds complexity to this, yeah? And space, not only in memory, but also on disk, right? Adds time. It's usually not, depending on what you want to do, it usually takes longer if you want to combine languages. Unless you decide, all right, we got to rewrite this part in Fortran, but that's another talk. Yeah? And of course, risk. So I hear some of you thinking, what about Python within R? Yeah? And I have to be honest here, I haven't had a situation yet where I needed to do this. But if you do, then I can definitely recommend that you check out Reticulate and Arrow. Right? Reticulate for running Python code in R, and Arrow for zero-copy data sharing. Yeah? And I also want to give a shout out to Positron and Quarto, right? Two tools that make it particularly convenient and pleasant to work with these two languages. Positron as an IDE and Quarto as a format. So I hope that through these stories, I've been able to convince you that there are definitely situations where it's worthwhile to embrace a polyglot approach. Yeah? It takes time and skill to sort of recognize when this is appropriate and which approach is the right one, which tools should I use. But that shouldn't stop you from clinging on to doing everything in the same language, how beautiful that language may be, like Dutch. So, all right, so I've shared with you through my stories a couple of these approaches and tools, RPy2, Reticulate, Arrow, saving and loading, right? So whatever you do, be mindful of the complexity that you're adding, space, time, risk, right? It may be more pragmatic, it may get the job done, but I think if you take all that into account, then you'll be good. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a few minutes, so send your questions in. Let's see, one, managing versions in each language takes work. Is it twice as bad or more when using both?
It's more than twice as bad. Yeah. Well, I mean, depends on how coupled the two processes will be, right? If you're using Reticulate and RPy2, there's a really tight connection between the two. Again, if you're using the other two approaches, like using piping or the save and load approach, right, where you have, say, a hard disk or a database in between, you decouple that, and it's exactly twice as bad.
Okay, another question. Could you explain a little bit more about how rewriting your R plus Python code with polars helps speed things up? Could you have used Arrow?
Yeah, so polars uses Arrow. And then some changes. But yeah, it uses an in-columnar or an in-memory columnar data frame format. So yeah, Arrow. good stuff. Parquet, right? These kind of things.
Okay. How do you determine when it's worth exploring doing something in another language if you can already do it in your primary language?
Yeah, so I think I think you'll recognize when there's a problem, right? You shouldn't just add another language just for the sake of it. But if you're like, maybe you work at a consultancy firm and you're asked to do something now in a different language, and you're like, oh man, I wish I just had that algorithm that I use in that other language. Then of course, then you're feeling it. Then you're feeling, okay, there is now a situation. Wait a minute, I remember what this Dutch guy was saying. I should use a polyglot approach. But if there is no problem, then I don't see any reason why you should not stick to the same language.
Okay. One more. What is something that R is missing for Python and something Python is missing from R?
Well, as we've seen in the previous talk, I mean, there are the two languages there are quite some fundamental differences between the two, right? With R, you've all been spoiled with the tidyverse and non-standard evaluation and the pipe operator, right? Those are things that aren't easily done in Python. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's about it. I was really hoping for applause there. I don't know, but the tidyverse.
All right. Thank you.